The year is 1943, and you're a 19-year-old ball turret gunner on a B-17 Flying Fortress, 25,000 feet above Nazi Germany. You're curled into a plexiglass sphere barely bigger than a washing machine, hanging beneath the belly of the bomber. Your knees are tucked against your chest, two .50 caliber machine guns between your legs. The temperature is 60 degrees below zero. And then you hear it, the mechanical grinding sound that every ball turret gunner dreads. Your turret mechanism has jammed, and you're trapped upside down with German fighters closing in. This wasn't some rare malfunction. This was the nightmare that haunted thousands of young gunners who volunteered for what many considered the most dangerous position on any aircraft in World War II. The Sperry ball turret was a marvel of engineering, but it was also a death trap. And the story of how engineers designed systems to save these men, and how the gunners themselves survived the impossible, reveals one of the most dramatic chapters of the air war over Europe. Let me explain why this position existed in the first place. German fighter pilots quickly learned that American bombers had a blind spot directly underneath. Messerschmitts would dive below the formation and attack from below where most guns couldn't reach them. The solution? Put a gunner in a rotating sphere under the plane with a 360-degree field of fire. Brilliant tactically. Absolutely terrifying for the man inside. The engineering was actually incredible. The Sperry Corporation designed a hydraulically operated sphere that could rotate completely and tilt up and down. The gunner controlled everything with handles connected to a computing gun sight. The problem was the space. To fit through the entry hatch, you had to be small, typically under 5'6" and less than 140 pounds. Once inside, you couldn't wear a parachute. There simply wasn't room. You were locked in that ball with your ammunition, your oxygen mask, your heated suit, and absolutely nothing else. Now here's where the survival engineering gets critical. The turret operated on hydraulic pressure from the plane's system. If flak or fighter rounds damaged those hydraulic lines, the turret couldn't rotate. And if it stopped in the wrong position, you couldn't get out. The entry hatch was inside the fuselage, which meant the turret had to be rotated to a specific position, guns facing directly forward and down, for the gunner to climb back up into the plane. If it jammed in any other position, that hatch didn't line up. You were sealed inside. The engineers at Sperry knew this was a problem. So they designed a manual hand crank system as a backup. If hydraulics failed, the gunner could theoretically hand crank the turret back into position. But here's what the engineers couldn't fully account for: the physical reality at 25,000 feet in combat. Your hands are numb from the cold even with heated gloves. You're breathing pure oxygen through a mask. You're exhausted from hours of scanning for fighters. And now you're supposed to hand crank a mechanism designed to move smoothly with hydraulic pressure, but which becomes incredibly difficult to turn manually, especially if any damage has distorted the metal housing. Multiple gunners reported the same thing: when the hydraulics failed, hand cranking the turret could take 15 to 20 minutes of exhausting work. And that's if everything went relatively well. If the plane was taking evasive action, you're being thrown around inside that sphere while you're trying to crank. If the turret took a direct hit and the metal was bent even slightly, the mechanism could be impossible to move by hand. So what happened when a ball turret gunner got trapped and the plane had to land? This is where the survival protocols got desperate. The ball turret hung lower than the landing gear. If the gunner couldn't get out, and the landing gear was intact, ground crews would rush to the plane and try to manually crank the turret from the outside or even cut through the housing. But if the landing gear was damaged, and landing gear was frequently shot up over Europe, the plane would have to belly land. The ball turret would be the first thing to hit the runway. The pilots faced an impossible choice. They couldn't leave a man trapped in the turret and circle forever. They had wounded aboard who needed immediate medical attention. They might be low on fuel. They had to land. Stories exist of pilots holding the plane in the air as long as possible while crew members tried everything to free the trapped gunner. Then having to make the terrible decision to land anyway. But here's what's remarkable: many gunners survived situations that should have killed them. How? through a combination of smart engineering decisions and incredible resourcefulness. First, Sperry had reinforced the front section of the turret with thicker armor plate. This wasn't just for protection from enemy fire, it provided crucial structural strength. When ball turrets hit the ground during belly landings, that front armor often prevented complete collapse of the sphere. Second, the ammunition storage design saved lives. The ammunition boxes were positioned to provide additional structural support around the gunner. They acted as internal bracing. There are documented cases of turrets being crushed flat in the front and back, but a small survival space remaining where the gunner was positioned because of how the ammunition boxes held the structure. Third, and this is where crew training made the difference, experienced ball turret gunners learned to position themselves defensively if they knew a belly landing was coming and couldn't get out. They would pull their arms and legs in as tight as possible and brace against the most reinforced sections of the turret. Some would even fire off all their ammunition first to remove that potential hazard and reduce weight that might cause the turret to hit harder. There's a documented case of a gunner named Staff Sergeant Alan McGee whose ball turret was hit by flak over France. The turret was destroyed, and McGee was blown out of the disintegrating bomber at 22,000 feet without a parachute. He fell through the glass roof of a train station, and the glass and the roof structure broke his fall just enough that he survived with severe injuries but lived to tell the story. That's not engineering, that's pure luck, but it shows the kind of situations these men faced. The Army Air Force eventually made modifications based on combat experience. Later B-17 models had improved emergency disconnect systems. Some crews would fly with the ball turret retracted whenever possible, only lowering it when enemy fighters appeared. This reduced exposure time. Maintenance crews became obsessive about checking hydraulic lines before every mission because they knew a gunner's life depended on those systems working, but perhaps the most important survival factor was the gunner's mental preparation. These men knew exactly what they were getting into. They knew the statistics. Ball turret gunners had one of the highest casualty rates of any position on the bomber. Yet they volunteered anyway because that turret was essential for protecting the entire crew from fighter attacks from below. The survival mindset wasn't just about emergency procedures, it was about accepting the risk and staying focused on the job even when every instinct screamed to panic. By the end of the war, thousands of ball turret gunners had flown combat missions over Europe and the Pacific. Many were killed in action. Many more survived situations that seemed impossible: trapped turrets, emergency landings, direct hits that should have been fatal. The combination of innovative engineering, continuous improvements based on combat experience, and the extraordinary courage of young men willing to curl up in a plexiglass ball hanging from a bomber made the difference between mission success and disaster. The Sperry ball turret remained in service because despite its dangers, it worked. It protected bomber formations and saved countless aircraft from being shot down by fighters attacking from below. The engineers never stopped improving it, and the gunners never stopped climbing into it, mission after mission, knowing that getting trapped was always a possibility. That's the real story of survival, not just the emergency systems and the reinforced armor, but the combination of human courage and engineering innovation working together under the most extreme conditions imaginable.